Here on the Safe Haven podcast, any names mentioned should not be considered as suspects unless officially stated as such by law enforcement. Any opinions during interviews on this podcast are the opinions of the interviewee and don't reflect the opinions of the Safe Haven podcast or the AMU cold case team. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Welcome back to the Safe Haven podcast, the murder of Judith Petty. I am Justin, and I am joined as always by Melissa, and we have a special guest on today as well. But before we get to that, Melissa's going to give us some case updates real quick.
Yeah, so we have some really good updates to share. If you are part of our Facebook group, you will have already heard the exciting news, but we now have an assigned prosecutor and investigator on Judy's case. So this is the first time since 2009 that we know of where someone has actively been assigned and looking into this case. So big win for Safe Haven crew, but also the Petty family. And we have the investigator assigned as Doug Strum, and he has been awesome so far, and I expect that to continue. And we are looking forward to working with him. And with that, he is giving us access to all of the case files. So we are super excited about that. It helps clear up some things that we don't know that happened back in 2008. So the fact that he's willing to partner with us is only going to make us stronger and find who killed Judy. So really big updates that we wanted to share in case you're not in the Facebook group. If you're not in the Facebook group, go ahead and join. We just hit over our 1,000 today members. So continue to like and follow us on the podcast and also in our Facebook group.
Absolutely. And we had the pleasure of doing a Zoom meeting with Doug yesterday. And I really like the guy, and he's very open, and he's very honest, very straightforward as well, which I can appreciate. Some people can't, but I definitely can. So it was good talking to him. I trust him. And the fact that he's willing to work with us and anybody that we bring on to consult as well is a very phenomenal and big step forward for the investigative team. So yeah, I'm very happy to have Doug involved.
Absolutely. So with that being said, we've been hyping you up, I guess, Alan, for weeks now. And our special guest is Alan. Everyone, Alan is our arson expert, or I keep saying arsonist, but our arson expert. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Like I said, my name's Alan Haskins, and I'm the Fire Science Program Director at Black River Technical College in Pocahontas, Arkansas. I've been in the fire service for 30 plus years, either as a firefighter, as a shift captain, fire chief. Now I'm teaching firefighters or people how to be firefighters or how to be better firefighters. And one of the things that we teach and we go over is arson and things along those lines. So that's what I'm doing now, and now helping you guys. So maybe we can get some answers.
Yeah, we appreciate it a lot.
Not a problem. So
you wrote up a great opinion article so we provided you with, just so the listeners know, we provided you with the fire department's report, the medical examiner's report, and based on all of your experience over 30 some years, you took a look at all of that and you wrote up an opinion for us on what you think happened or some things to look at and to consider. So what we want to do is go through that report first. And then obviously we have a ton of questions in the Facebook group that people want to ask you. We wrote them down and we will get to all of those as we go along. So if you want to kind of start, reading, telling us about the what you found in your report initially.
Before we get going, I do have to put out a little disclaimer for the listeners. Some of the content we are going to be talking about today will get a little bit graphic. So if you're not okay with that, then there's going to be some parts you want to skip over, or you might not want to listen. So I do have to tell you guys that, because Alan is going to be straightforward with us, and we value his expertise in this field, so we need to hear it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was worried about. So I just don't want to make anybody upset or madder than what they need to be. So the first part of it, I'll read it real quick. After reading the medical examiner's report that stated Miss Judith Petty did not have high concentrations of either drugs or carbon monoxide in her body, and reviewing the state fire marshal's investigation report, it's my opinion that Miss Petty was murdered outside of the cellar where her remains were found.
One of the things that jumps out to us right away is, can you explain to the listeners how you came to this opinion of her being murdered outside of the cellar and not in the cellar or not in the house? What makes you think that it was outside the cellar?
Okay, well, one of the things that when you do an investigation like this, especially when there is a body involved or a victim, you want to go in and look at the toxicology report to see how that victim died. So that was one of the first things I looked at, and her body was burnt so bad that they only found very, very little soft tissue. And soft tissue is where the toxicological report's going to come from. So you look at that and see if there were any drugs in her system, any toxicants in her system like carbon monoxide, and there were none. She had normal levels, and all of us just breathing air around our vehicles, around, when we're cooking in our house, anything like that, you're going to have very minute levels of carbon monoxide. And the threshold that she had in her system at the time was normal. So if she would have died from the fire itself, she would have had extremely high levels for it to have killed her. And 99 times out of 100, when somebody dies in a structure fire, it's not from the fire, the heat itself, it's from the gases, from the smoke, which contains that carbon monoxide. And the way carbon monoxide kills us or kills humans or anybody, or animals, test animals, whatever, you develop what's called carboxyhemoglobin. And the carbon monoxide gets in our bloodstream, and what's odd is the cells in our body, the red blood cells, had rather absorb carbon monoxide as they would oxygen. The way the cellular breakdown of it is, it will absorb it faster than it will oxygen. So that's when you develop the carboxyhemoglobin, and it displaces the oxygen in our bodies, which causes us to start out, you'll get nauseous and headaches, and then it just goes downhill from there. So I was looking at some toxicology information before we got on, and around 60 to 70% is where it's going to be at to be lethal. And
okay.
Way below that. If you look at the toxicology report, it's way below that. The other thing that they looked for was drugs, to see if she might have been drugged, if she might have been on something, drinking, anything like that would have shown up in there too. And the good part about this is, if there is a good part, the soft tissue that they found was her liver, which, a lot of people don't realize it, but your liver works kind of like an oil filter in your engine. It filters out all the bad stuff, and it kind of goes to that spot, and then it goes into your endocrine system, and it goes into waste and then on out. So the other thing that they found in there was sertraline, which is an antidepressant, and at those levels that she had was normal levels for somebody that's on a prescription medicine like that. So
I wanted to stop you right there and ask you about that, because one of the theories back then, or one of the, possible solutions, was that she was so depressed. She was so depressed, she overdosed, and she was out walking and was confused. But based on those levels, we've heard, and also you're confirming, that it was normal range. She didn't have anything that would have caused her to have any kind of confusion, disorientation, nothing like that.
Not that I've seen in the toxicology report. It would have shown up if it would have been there. And it wouldn't have been something that somebody would have hid or whatever, to make it look like something else. The carbon monoxide itself, and for it to be accidental, like you were saying, she was depressed, out walking around, maybe she overdosed from something and died. That still doesn't explain the fire. If she died prior to that, she herself couldn't have started the fire. She couldn't have started it accidentally, because she would have still been breathing after the fire started. She would have breathed in that carbon monoxide or those other gases. So By it not being there, that tells me that she was not breathing from the time the fire started until she passed away. I will firmly believe that she was killed prior to, and then her body placed there, and then the fire started.
One of the other questions that we have a lot right now that we're trying to get more information on is her being diabetic. Now, would that be something that you would see in her liver levels as well, or no?
I'm not 100% sure on that. You would think if she was taking some kind of diabetic, medicine for that insulin, the sugar range might have been, high or low, depending on where she was at that point in time. But still, at that, it still doesn't explain the fire and the carbon monoxide. The key to the whole thing with this, by the body, where it's at, being killed prior to being in the fire, is the carbon monoxide. Because even if she would have been in some kind of went into a diabetic coma,
right?
Maybe she kicked over a lantern or something. Let's just say that if she went into some kind of a seizure or something and accidentally started the fire, there still would have been the carbon monoxide. So that's where I'm at with that.
Look, I got one for you. What is your opinion of the original fire investigation?
Well, there were two.
Yes.
If you look at the report, there were two separate fire investigations.
Yes, both of them. If you have time.
Yeah, that's no problem, because I feel it's important to talk about both of them.
Absolutely.
The first one that was done, if you look at the report, was done by the Wood County Fire Investigative Team.
Yes.
I believe the reason that they done it that way back then was because they thought all they had was a structure fire or a house fire. Reading the report, the state fire marshal's report, Mr. Petty found her remains later on that day after they had originally done the initial fire report. If I'm reading it right, on the 9th, well, it is on the 9th, it's when the state fire marshal's office come in and started pulling her remains out. So once Mr. Petty found that they'd already done their fire investigation, they thought, hey, this is more than what we can handle. So let's get, and I don't mean that derogatory, because I'm sure they done a great job doing what they were doing. But once they found that body, it could turn into a homicide. So they had to get some type of law enforcement in there to do that type of an investigation. And that's when they brought the state fire marshal's office in. The first investigation, they only done the house. And I believe that in their mind, coming from the fire service, I believe in their mind, they felt that the house caught on fire originally, and then radiant heat from it set the outbuilding on fire and all these other things on fire around it. I don't believe that's the way it happened, but I think that's the way they thought in their mind. And they, with where her body was found, or her remains were found, was in the outbuilding, in the basement, or in the cellar part underneath it. So they had no idea that it was there. So that's the only investigation that they done. They thought, well, it's just an outbuilding. We're not going to worry about it. We're just going to, this had to have been where it started at. So that's why they done what they done. Then once they brought the state in, I feel like the reason they didn't find any burn patterns or anything like that was they were concentrated just on the body and they thought, well, it's burnt this bad, and all we're finding is pieces now of her body. We're going to have to sift through this, and that's all they concentrated on, was that one area where her remains were. But if you look at the pictures, that's where they cleaned it all the way back down to the concrete. Back to my opinion of it, I think they were both good investigations. I just don't know, especially on the first investigation, I know they weren't looking for a body. They thought it was just a fire. They thought it was, somebody. I think they thought somebody come up there and burnt Mr. Petty's house down. Then once they found the body in the outbuilding, things changed. And I think those investigators, when they come in from the state at the time, they were so concentrated on that body that they might have overlooked or didn't understand some of the things that they were looking at. And that happens. It just does.
Yeah, that's fair.
Alan, I do want to kind of talk through that scenario about her diabetes, because the only reason I want to kind of go back to that just for a second is because That is something we hear a lot. Was she in a diabetic? Did her sugar crash? Is that what the cause? And at the end of the day, like you said, we still think you still got the fire. So it doesn't really matter any of that. But that's constantly something that we keep hearing. And so we kind of want to address that. And we are trying to look to see, how much insulin she took, how many times a day. But I don't think, would you agree that doesn't play a factor in any of this? Would you say that?
Not the way that with the fire and location of her body. I don't think it plays a factor in any of it. I really don't. Again, I mean, you would almost have to have been there to know exactly why she was killed or why she died. So I just don't see the diabetes really playing a factor in where we're at this point. She might have had, some type of episode during the day, and that might be why she was walking out to the farm. I really don't know.
And I think that's one thing that we really wanted to address and look at. So thank you. And I agree. We all agree with you. We don't feel like that has a factor into how she ended up dead, right, in a fire.
I don't think so. And you'll see that a lot with people that are diabetics. We've worked accidents before, automobile accidents, where somebody was a diabetic and they had an episode driving down the road and they run off the road, hit a tree, or they hit somebody else or something like that. You can directly affect that cause to that, to a medical episode. But something like this, where there's a fire involved, and especially with there not being any carbon monoxide in her system, I just don't see that is playing a factor in it.
That's great. So let's go on to the next part of your report. So you talk about the cellar and the dimensions. Can you go over that with us?
Yeah, sure. I said that the description of the cellar was that it was a 12 by 15 and it was 6.5 foot deep. This was a ground structure, and it was laid out north to south. And her body or her remains were found in the southeast corner of that structure. And if you look at the picture, if the folks can see the picture on the Facebook page, if they look down the stairs and just to the right of the stairs is where she would have been found at. So her body was in the southeast corner, and it was laying in a east to south orientation, with the head being towards the east and the feet being toward the south. That also tells me that she was placed there, because you think about, and we teach this in the fire service, and in law enforcement teaches the same thing. If you have to drag a victim, 9 times out of 10 you pick them up from the shoulders and with the head, or you grab them by the arms and pull their hands over their arms and drag them. You don't drag them the other way. The normal reaction for somebody is to pick somebody up like around the shoulders or by the arms. So that tells me, in my theory, is that they drug her head first down the cellar and then would have just laid her down right there. And then I think they found like a fairly open spot on the floor and laid her down right there.
Okay. So she was about 245 pounds, right, Justin?
Yes.
That was one question that I had, was her body dimensions and how tall she was and how much she weighed and all that, because that also plays an effect on the fire, and I'll get into that here in a little bit as well.
Yeah, she was about 5'5", about 245.
So would you think that one person could pull somebody? I mean, so what makes you think she was maybe pulled down the stairs and not maybe killed in the cellar?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, that's just, I mean, they could have,
You're going on the position. He's going on the position of her body, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going strictly on the position of where she was laid at, because what makes sense to me in my mind, I hate to sound this way, but if I was going to do it, that's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's sometimes whenever you get into these investigations, that's the way you got to play it out. Yep. What makes sense. You know? And that makes sense to me that they would have pulled her head, pulled her down that way, and just when they come in, they just laid her down.
It's like gravity doing the work, though, too, right? Because if you're going down the stairs and you're going backwards, and we say that all the time, which is why we go on location, because until you put yourself in those positions or in that scene, it speaks to you. But then you get a feel for, you have to think, what did they do? What was going through their mind? Right. And I think that's a very good observation or point that you made, is that if she was dragged that way going down the stairs, that makes it a lot easier for one person or so, because you've got the gravity.
Yeah. The fact that she was right at the bottom of the stairs too. It's like they didn't take the time to drag her to the back. They just pulled her down the stairs and took her to the left.
If she was 245 pounds ish, they would have dragged her any farther. They just got her to that point and just stopped right there with her.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
so that's why I developed that process or that thought in my head was the way that was. I mean, you kind of got to play it out as you're looking at this and reading through that. You got to kind of picture how this is all going about. And then the last sentence that I wrote there was, I believe then an accelerant was poured in that same area, possibly on her and the surrounding contents of the cellar, and ignited. So here's where it gets to some of the stuff that I don't really want to talk about, but it's necessary. When a human body catches on fire, the fat is just like when you're cooking and on a grill or whatever, and you see fat running out and it flames up. Same thing happens with our human bodies, and I believe that that's where a lot of this come from, and it takes so much heat to get that going and everything. So that's what I believe what happened right there. And I think one of the pictures that I sent you where I circled it in blue, there was like some marks on the floor. What can happen in those areas right there, especially if you pour out an accelerant, it will leave those marks on the floor from that accelerant. And those are called pour patterns. They can also be construed sometimes as ventilation patterns where the fire was pulling air into it and it got hotter right there. But I believe, in my mind, that's what happened. Is she was placed there and they poured some type of an accelerant out and started it in that area.
If I'm understanding you right, so you're saying because she, it was somebody who is heavier or has more, weight to them, if you will.
It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody heavier. All of us have body fat. And that body, when it burns, and you're burning like that, that fat will render and run out and catch on fire. So, and again, if somebody is heavier, that could cause. I know there have been documented cases where an extremely obese person had gone into a crematorium and they had a really, really large fire from that inside that crematorium. So that's what happens.
Okay. So you think that an accelerant was used on Judy or in that area?
Yes, I do. I do believe it. The reason I say that is in that same area on the east wall and the south wall, there are marks on the concrete that appear to be fire marks called spalling. So what that is, that's a phenomenon that happens in structure fires where there's concrete around, whether it's the floor or on the wall. Concrete, no matter how old it is, always contains some level of moisture, like water. So what happens is when that temperature gets to and exceeds 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the boiling point of water, it converts that water to a steam. Well, water does not compress. So that steam starts expanding and it blows the surface of the concrete off or causes it to fracture. And if you look at those pictures, you can actually see those spots. And I believe that's what that is just by looking at the pictures. And I've seen it time and time again here at our facility where we have our burn building out back. When we train firefighters, we have actually had some of the concrete in our burn building actually spall and look like this. And I can send you guys pictures of it if you would like to show you what I'm seeing is and compare it to those pictures and see if you agree with me on it. But you see a lot of that spalling in that one corner. And I've looked at the pictures of the basements and they went around, I don't see it in other places. So that tells me that it burnt a little bit longer in that area by the time frame. So what happens, a lot of investigators, the way that they go to and find a point of origin is they'll go from the least burnt spot to the most burnt. Where it's burnt the most at is where it burnt the longest. And that usually is where your point of origin is. And that kind of tells me where her body was found is where the point of origin was. To get a body going and to cause a fire of that damage, they're going to have some type of an accelerant there that got her on fire plus other parts or other fuels there on fire as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. So how long would you say, or is it hard to say, that this fire would have to burn for it, for Judy to be, the remains that were recovered?
When a body is legally cremated, the crematorium usually runs anywhere from 1,800 to 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And for the body to be completely burned up is 1 to 2 hours. But at that, you're still going to have parts left: skull, teeth, pelvis, things like that. And if you go in and look, that's very interesting to me, because if I go in here and look at the medical examiner's report, the parts that they looked at: skull, teeth, parts of the pelvis. Then there was other places, other bones that were there as well too, but that's really, really interesting. So that kind of tells me that that fire reached 1,800 to 2,000 degrees in that spot. But here's what else happened. As that fire consumed the rest of that building, everything fell in on top of her. And what happened is all that stuff fell in on top of her, and it got to burning, and it was just like in a pit. So it was there. It was containing that heat right there in that one spot, right on top of her body, and it just consumed everything up. And if you look at the fire report, they did not go in and try to extinguish the fire. It was basically allowed to just burn itself out. So when it burned itself out, it sat there and smoldered for hours, and it consumed her body up. I hope that answers your question on the length of time. So, and also another thing on length of time, that's another thing that I didn't put in my opinion, was you can have a fairly good sized house, especially if it's an older house and the conditions are just right. You can set that thing on fire and have it on the ground. I mean, from start to finish on the ground in about an hour and a half-ish. It doesn't take long. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube that you can look up of fire departments that are doing that for training. They'll set the house on fire and just let it burn itself out, because you can actually get a lot of good training from just watching these things burn, because you can see where it's drawing air from, or how it's ventilating, or how it's doing this, or how it's doing that, how the fire spreads from one place to the other. And it just actually, it'll consume itself and be on the ground. Now, you'll still have that smoldering going on where all that debris is filling in on top of itself. Yeah, it'll be going on for hours, maybe even a day or two, and so that's basically what happened here, I believe, is it just fell in on top of her and consumed her up.
That cellar had like aluminum roofing. Is that right, Justin? It was like aluminum roofing.
Yeah, it was like a tin roof.
Yeah, the corrugated tin. I saw that in the pictures laying around there. So that will, you sent me an email the other day asking me about that. Will hold the heat in, because it's pushing down on top of it. Metal will always do that. In fact, it will reflect it at one point.
So overall, what you're saying is basically, because everyone has these questions, right? Mm-hmm. How long would a fire have to burn? Not that long,
Not
right?
That long, no.
Because all the conditions were correct.
Right. I hate to use this term, but it'd be what happened here was an absolute perfect storm to get rid of a body. Honestly, if you go back and you study arson, look through all of our textbooks and everything, and one of the worst ways to cover up a murder is to burn the house, because 9 times out of 10 the body's still there. Some parts of the body is there,
Mm-hmm.
Even in this case, but they got really close. I mean, I'll be honest, they got really close to burning everything completely up. And they had, I believe, with that falling in on top of her, they had lower temperatures than the 1,800 degrees that it takes, but the time was longer of it laying there on top of her. So they had a whole day almost of that smoldering on top of her body that it could have, burn up before anything was done. And if you look at the report, they were allowed, they allowed it to do that. They didn't try to put it out.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm not doing this because I come from the fire service, so don't take it the wrong way. But in defense of the fire department, if you listen to what Mr. Petty says, I watched one of Jen's videos, kind of doing some research on all this and getting some information on it. He said the fire department got there and wouldn't go up the hill because they needed a 4-wheel drive. Okay. In their defense, probably, and I haven't got the report and didn't hear the page out, but when they were paged out, they were paged to a structure fire, more than likely. When he would have called them and told 911, hey, my house is burnt down, I need some help. Well, the dispatcher would have got it on the radio and told them, hey, you need to go to a structure fire at whatever the address is. And they would have responded in a pumper truck, which would not have gone up that hill at that point in time. So I understand, a little bit about why they didn't go up there, but yeah, I believe that's why.
Yeah, they did take the brush trucks up, I think, is what you're saying. And
do you know when they took the brush trucks up? Do you have a time frame on when the brush trucks actually went up to the scene?
Not off the top of my head. I don't have a time. I know it was. I don't have off the top of my head. No, I don't want to say something that's not correct.
Right.
I don't know when.
I do know what it took. It was still at this point would have taken quite a bit of water, to put it completely out. But
so people were wondering now, with this type of fire, would you be able to see this fire from?
Absolutely. And another question that I had, that we were talking about the time frame a while ago, one of the other questions that I had that I was going to ask you guys, and this is a good point to ask it. Mr. Petty said that he had gone up there several times during the night looking for her. Do you know the last time he was there?
He remembers about 11:30 or midnight.
Okay. So the fire would have had to have happened between that point and when he found her. Because that type of a fire is going to put out a very, very large glow. And it's going to, you're going to know that it's a fire. You're going to see, even at night, you're going to see the smoke plume and you're going to see a large glow. I have actually been paged out in rural areas before to structure fires at around this time frame after midnight or so, that we have seen it from miles away. So, that's something I do believe would have happened, that he would have seen that, or somebody would have seen it if they were looking for it. So in most of the time, and I'm not saying this is what happened in this case, but a lot of times arsons are going to be in the wee hours of the morning, from like after midnight, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, because most people are asleep. They're not out looking for that sort of thing.
And that's what we were kind of thinking too, is, nobody heard anything, nobody saw anything. Right. And the thought is it had to be in the middle of the night. Their neighbors on the back property would have seen it if they were awake. They didn't see anything, but Mr. Petty didn't drive up to the house or up to the driveway. So he didn't see anything, didn't notice anything. Just because it's such a long driveway, you cannot see anything. So that would be interesting if it was more in the middle of the night. And by the time he showed up, that's how he found it, because it wouldn't have taken long from what you're saying.
Right. It wouldn't have taken, I'm thinking 2 or 3 hours at the most from start to finish. And until it's down to the point that Mr. Petty found it, which was, if I understood him correctly, it was on the ground and there was just like 1 or 2 beams left of the floor of the house. And so that tells me that it's on the ground at this point.
Yeah. Everything was on the ground at that point. And going back, you think that the cellar was started first, and then
I believe it was.
The winds and all of that, it probably went to the house.
Yeah, the state fire marshals, they said in their report that they didn't believe that it was started from, they believe it was 2 sets or more. I don't believe so. I've seen fires before that were, this shed or this outbuilding was 32 feet from the house. So one of the rule of thumbs, like when people ask us if they can burn some brush piles or anything like that, it's 50 feet away from any structure. So, when you're within that range, I do believe that radiant heat is high enough. I do believe radiant heat would be high enough that it could transfer enough heat to that house to set it on fire. The motorcycle that was there, I'm 100% believing that was radiant heat to burn it. And the one tree that they were showing, I do believe it was radiant heat as well. Now, I believe the radiant heat from the house was higher than what the shed was, but I do believe the shed was high enough to set the house on fire. And I have seen before there, one of the things that they said was they didn't believe that it spread from the shed to the house because the vegetation was still standing in between the two. I've seen it jump before without doing that. We see it a lot on wildfires, jumping all the way across highways and stuff. So, fires can do that. Fires can do some really, really crazy things that people don't.
Yeah. And I believe the wind that night was going from the right to the left. So from the cellar to the house.
The wind is going to push that as well, that heat, that radiant heat. There's 3 ways that fire can spread through like that. It's convection, conduction, and radiation. I believe this was radiation heat that come off of that. And I've seen houses before literally melt the siding and shingles and everything else from one house to the other without, and not even scorch the ground underneath it. There might be some people out there that listen to this that say, oh, he's full of crap, and but but I've literally seen it. I mean,
yeah.
So.
One of the things that we are wondering, and we kind of already mentioned this before when we were talking about her position, and I think it makes sense now, and maybe we answered our own question, but that the cellar did have 2 levels.
Right.
So they had the top level where there was a door, and you could go in, and then there was the cellar with the stairs down.
There was a structure on top of that.
And so one of the thoughts was, is it possible? We won't know until we're there, or if we were there, but that she was in on the top floor and then it burned and she dropped down, and that would explain the skull fracture. But my only problem with that theory is she would have went straight down, not over to the right by the stairs. But again, what's your thoughts on that?
I don't believe so. I mean, anything's possible. I mean, we're not going to throw that out the window. Anything's possible. I don't believe it happened that way, because if you look in the accident report or in the investigation, they had to remove debris off the top of her remains. You still, if she was in the top floor, you still could have that, but there would be more debris under her remains than there were on top of it.
That makes absolute sense. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I believe that there would have been more debris under her, but if you look in the report, it says that they actually had to pick stuff off, and I believe, if I remember Mr. Petty's statement correctly, he saw it like underneath stuff. It's like one bone, jawbone, or something.
So getting to the skull fracture, what do you think about that? Is it possible? We've heard many different things. The family's heard many different things. One of the things that they've heard is that her head, filled with so much fire, exploded.
Well, it wouldn't have filled with fire.
Or heat.
Yeah, well, it could have. So if you'll read in the medical report, you'll see where they talk about bones being twisted, fractured, and all that from the heat. It will do that. So again, our bodies are made up of mostly water. So the water will start doing things to the bones and causing it to move around and do all that. So I do believe it would to a point, but from what I read in the medical examiner's report, especially from the Smithsonian, it was smaller fragments. I'm not going to say the fire didn't do it, but I'm going to say it's not likely.
Fair enough. What would you think would do?
Could be blunt force trauma.
Right.
Rock, all bat, hammer, anything. Fist. I mean, if somebody's pounding or stomping, somebody's head enough.
Or boot.
Boot. Yeah, that's what I mean. You're kicking. But if you listen to like some of the FBI things with somebody that inflicts that much trauma on somebody, they're usually pretty mad at them for something. That they just keep. I don't know. I mean, they may have hit her one time and she just kept, didn't die. So they just kept on until they knew she was dead. One of the things that I wondered about, and I don't know if there was any rain in between 6th, 7th, and 8th. Do you know?
There wasn't any rain, but there was snow, I think on the 8th through the overnight.
Okay. One of the things that I was wondering about was if this was blunt force trauma or if there was some type of bodily damage that would have caused bleeding and it was done outside and not inside the cellar, you would think there would have been some blood on that grass and stuff because it wasn't burned up between the cellar and the house. There should have been some somewhere, somehow, especially if they drugged her. That's just my thinking. And I don't know if they even thought to look for that at the time. I don't know.
No, because they thought it was a missing persons case. I mean, at that point, everyone's trampling over everything.
Right.
No one's looking for anything. Mr. Petty saying, my daughter's missing, my house is on fire. Nobody knows.
I think it's kind of an unexpected surprise to them. They just basically stumbled upon the crime scene. Is what happened. Yeah. And I heard Mr. Petty say that they had the dogs there, and the dogs kept going between the house and the shed and the house, back and forth. And that's another thing that made me wonder about the blood being in there somewhere. If the dogs were hitting back and forth like that, could that be what they were hitting on? Because, I mean, I've worked with dogs before on missing persons and stuff, and cadaver dogs. And honestly, the case that we worked, I wasn't overly impressed with them. But I do know that they do work. from time, so.
Yeah, they can. I wonder too, because they didn't pick up her scent, probably because her remains were so decompressed, decomposed. They didn't pick her scent up, but they were, kind of hitting multiple places. And that's why Mr. Petty then went over to the cellar, because nobody else was really paying attention to them. And then he went over and happened to look down, and then, they didn't know if it was animal or human remains.
Right. So, that's where I'm at with it, so I wondered that, if somebody did or they didn't. I didn't see it in the report anywhere that, somebody looked for anything. And from what I've read, on the police side of this, it was kind of a really messed up investigation, because somebody just kind of passed the buck on to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else, because another in defense of them on that case, not really a defense, explanation as to why that happens. I know here where I'm at in Arkansas, it is really, really easy to prove arson, but it's really, 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 really hard to prove who did it or to get a conviction on it. And you'll see a lot of, prosecutors and stuff that won't take an arson case because they're like, who did it? Well, we think we know who did it. Well, I can't prosecute somebody on I think. So there's a lot of people that just like don't even mess with it unless there is a body like what we have here. And I think that's what happened was, well, we found a body. Well, now we've got to step up the investigation.
And that was, after the fact, and then they kind of weren't working together, and there was a lot of different things going on. But some of the questions in our Facebook group that I'll just kind of throw out now and see, do some accelerants burn hotter than others, was one of the questions in the group.
That's kind of a tough question, but the short answer of it is not really. To get an accelerant to burn hotter, you just need more of it. The more that you have there, the hotter it's going to be. Now, I do know in certain situations you can pour an accelerant out in a house in small amounts and light it on fire, and it will burn itself out before it sets the house on fire. We have what we call fuel load inside of a structure in the fire service. If there's anybody out there listening that's in the fire service, they know what I'm talking about when we talk about fuel load, and that's the contents of the building: couches, love seats. I believe Mr. Petty said he had like stacks of oak flooring in there and other things, So that's all a heavy fuel load in that building as well. So what you got to try to do, and I hate to say this because I'm throwing out ideas for arsonists, but what you got to do is put enough accelerant in there to get that on fire and to speed up the process. Now, I could just put paper in there and set the paper on fire and hope that it sets everything else on fire. But I do believe that they use some type of an accelerant with her body in there, and they got the rest of the stuff on fire in that basement, and then it just spread straight up and it come down on top of it. For any of it to be hotter than another, there is probably, but to have any data and have any actual numbers that I can tell you, not off the top of my head. I mean, there's so many things out there that people could use. The most common are going to be your hydrocarbons like gasoline, diesel fuel, kerosene, stuff like that, because it's the most common.
And we do want to say that we did find out a couple of things after talking with Doug yesterday. So for the listeners to know, there was electricity out at the house. So that's something that we were not sure of, that we had heard there was no electricity. There was electricity to the house, but not the cellar. So I don't know if that's here or there, but there was electricity. And for me, that makes more sense why Judy may have been going out there. Because before we were wondering, there's no electricity. What's she going to do when she gets out there? Maybe she was going out there to hang out in the house. That was her plan.
Did she just have times where she would just go out there and stay for a little bit just to get away from everybody, or did she?
No, never. This has never been. She loved to walk, but she'd walk around in town. So this is very unlike her.
Yeah, this would be a 13-mile walk for her from where she started.
And that kind of blew my mind that she would be. I mean, I'm not walking that far just to go visit a farm. I don't know of anybody that. I mean, I'm sure somebody would, but I'm not. If I'm a 245-pound diabetic, I'm not walking that far.
Absolutely agree.
Physically, it's going to be extremely hard for somebody to walk that far.
I don't know if you saw the video, but it's 13 miles and it's a horrible road. No matter which way you go, the terrain, the road, there's nowhere to walk. It's dark out, all of those factors. But so we don't know her purpose of her motive for wanting to go out there. Now that there's electricity, maybe she was going to hang out there, spend the night, stay for a few hours.
Another thing that I noticed in the autopsy report or in the findings was they found toes from a steel-toed boot.
Yes, hers.
I don't know if you've ever walked in steel-toed boots before.
I have.
13 miles is going to be a chore.
That's going to hurt.
I think she was wearing hiking boots with the steel toe.
Well, still, I mean, those are not the most comfortable shoes to wear with steel toes. I mean, it's just
right.
Not.
And they're colder in the winter too.
Very.
Are they really?
Yeah, that steel gets cold, really cold.
The toe part?
Yeah.
You can get that cold?
Oh yeah.
It gets sick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why do you even have the steel toe? I guess I don't understand.
Well, that's that blue collar life, you know.
So back to my original thought was that we do have electricity in the house, not the cellar. The other thing I mentioned earlier to you, Alan, is that there was accelerants available. So that was one of the questions in the Facebook group. Was there accelerants? We found out there was. So Mr. Petty had the motorcycle probably had some gas in it, or gas cans, or he had a weed eater, a lawnmower.
Well, it's a farm, and I mean, if anybody's ever grew up on a farm, I mean, you're going to have that stuff laying around everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Do you think, based on all of that someone actually took the time to pour accelerant on her, or that they just started a fire?
I believe. All right, let's think about this again from the perspective of the person that done this.
Yes.
I'm wanting to get rid of the evidence. There's 3 or 4 reasons that somebody burns or commits arson. One is to collect on insurance money.
Right.
That one of the things that we say in the fire service is the insurance papers and the mortgage papers get to run together, and that's one reason people start a fire. This wasn't the case.
Nope.
The other one is just to watch it burn. I mean, there is a psychological thing out there where people, they get sexually satisfied by watching fire. Pyromania is the name of it, and then there's the other reason, that's to cover up something, to cover up a crime. And I do believe that that's what happened here. So in that case, I'm wanting to get rid of that evidence, and I'm going to pour that accelerant on that evidence to burn it up. So I do believe that's what happened. I do believe he poured, or she, or whoever poured that accelerant on top of her, maybe made a trail back away from it and lit it and let it go down into the basement and ignite it. I do believe that's what happened.
I agree. Is it possible that we've heard this, and don't laugh, Alan, but it's crazy what we hear sometimes. Is it possible that this was an explosion?
I'm not going to laugh at that, because I do believe there was an explosion, but it wasn't in the house, or wasn't in the shed or in the outbuilding. There was definitely an explosion in the house. And if you will go back, and I'll here in a little bit, I will tag the picture and send it to you. There is a picture of an LP tank that's got a rupture on the side of it. And it's a fairly large LP tank that was inside the house. Now, what we call in the fire service, that's called a blevy. And that's a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. So what happens is it gets so hot that it starts boiling the liquid inside, and it ruptures and explodes. So that could be where a lot of the damage from the house come from too. If there is an explosion in that cellar, it's going to go up and out. Where's her body going to be laying at? If she's tugging on that door and it blows up and out, where is she going to be laying at?
Exactly.
Out in the yard. There's no way for her to get back down in there.
Well, that and all the debris from the fire was in a concentrated area as well.
Right. That building on top of it would have been up and out as well. And you would have had less burn than what you have when you have a fire. An explosion is going to blow. You're going to have some fire post-explosion, but it's going to be out and about everywhere. It's not going to be right in on top of her body. I think I don't even think that's plausible.
I agree. The other question I have is, what about suicide? That gets thrown out a lot. Even though she was dead before the fire, is it possible she started the fire and then killed herself?
I'm not going to say no, but she would have had to have done something that would have been an instantaneous death, like a gunshot. She would have had to shot herself. She would have had to have done it in the bottom of the basement. The pistol, whatever, would have been laying there with her. And the other part of that is they went in during the autopsy report and done x-ray scans for bullet fragments and bullet tracing and what's called bullet smear. That would have all shown up somewhere in that skull. So I don't believe that was the case either.
Right. I agree.
And
it just helps to have you on from all of our, run through all of these scenarios, right? And talk them through, because these are questions that our listeners have that we have that can only move us closer to getting to the truth of who killed Judy. And
if you think about that, though, the different type of weapon might explain why her skull was fragmented like it was, but there was no bullet smear. There was no weapon there. The weapon would have been there unless somebody come in and took it out of there, but it wasn't there. I mean, she's not going to shoot herself and then go throw it away and then come back and die. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Right. So, or they could have used something around the property, like the cellar had a lot of stuff in it. There was a lot of opportunity for things, or if it was an accident, somewhere else. And,
I think you can rule out accidental or suicide simply by going back to the toxicology report of not being any carbon monoxide. One of the things that I thought about that did cross my mind, and this is another reason I asked about the blood tracing on the outside with stab wounds or somebody like cut her throat or something. The only way that you could have tell that at this point was looking at the bones and look for knife marks on the bones or something. But the ribs weren't there. There wasn't enough ribs there to, for like a stab wound or something, or like, around her throat or something. There were, most of the time it'll go down to the vertebrae. That vertebrae was gone. So who knows at this point? But I don't see it being accidental. I don't see it being suicide. I just really don't. Strangulation, maybe. Hitting the head, maybe. It wasn't an overdose. The tox screen showed there was no drugs there. Stabbing, maybe. I just think that's where we're at with it. I mean, I don't see it being any other way.
Right. And we agree. Yeah. We agree. It's helpful. I love being able, I don't know about you, Justin, but I love talking to you and hearing your different thoughts and scenarios and walk these through, because we do it all the time. And we've been over this, so many times, but it's nice to have somebody new come in with your expertise and look at this. All right. So we hope this episode has been helpful to everyone. We've loved talking with you, Alan. We hope we can have you back for a future episode. So thank you so much for joining. And I will share the photos that you shared with me where you circled certain things so that the listeners can see what we're talking about in the areas that you're speaking about.
Well, I'm a member on the page too. So if any of them have any questions, they can, and I check it, tell them just to point them on there, and if it's all right with you guys, tell them just to ask away, and I'll try to answer
Absolutely.
them as they pop up.
Perfect. Alan, you're fielding all questions now. Everybody, any questions regarding Arson, the fire, Alan's going to take over the Facebook page and answer them. I'll just tag you, Alan.
I mean, seriously, I'll be more than happy to help with this. I mean, anything you guys need, just let me know. If anything else comes up, as Doug's doing his investigation, if you call me and say, hey, is this possible? Could this have happened? And even Doug, tell him, if he wants to get a hold of me, I'll be glad to, talk to him and go over things with him too. So.
Yep. And he's already going to do that. He's very excited to listen to this episode. And I sent him your opinion that you wrote up. So he will be contacting you. And I'm very excited about that, so that you both can talk and strategize, and kind of, our whole thing is to go forward and to get answers for Mr. and Mrs. Petty and Judy and the Petty family. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We do appreciate it, man. Thanks for taking the time.
You bet. Not a problem.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Well, all right. Bye.
See you guys.
So, Melissa, what'd you think about Alan and what he had to say?
I loved him. We've been waiting for him forever to come on. And I was so excited we finally got to chat with him. And I just felt I could have talked to him for hours.
Yeah, that was the best part for me, is I was just listening to him talk, and then any question I could think of, really, it was he answered it as he kept going. That's why I was like pretty quiet the whole time. I was like, he's answering all the questions that I had, so I'm good here.
Yeah, he was so good. And, his report. And I think one of the things that I just loved about the interview with him was that he was able to walk us through different scenarios or different, options and possibilities, and also discount things of probability, likelihood. So I think that's really helpful.
He definitely went through the percentages factor, which is a big thing that I'm on. Like, I always play the percentages. I don't want to say play the percentages, but there's more probable things than other things, if that makes sense. And the explosion, no, absolutely not an explosion. And it was funny because when we were talking to him about it, he's just like, oh, no, there's no way. But his knowledge was extremely helpful, I think. I think the listeners are going to really appreciate that. And, for the listeners, again, I know you probably heard some graphic details that you didn't want to hear. I gave the disclaimer beforehand, and Alan even said, this is the stuff I don't want to talk about right now. But that information is crucial for us knowing more about the case and more about the fire. So I appreciate him being very respectful about that. But we got to have that information as well.
We do. And I found his theory or his idea of her being, taken in down the stairs. I thought that made a lot of sense when you look at it that way.
Oh, definitely.
I also took away that this fire didn't have to burn long. And so I know everyone's wanting the hours that it would take. He said 1 to 2 because it was really, like we've all said, the perfect storm for a fire. And the killer almost got away, but he didn't. We still have evidence. We still have facts that prove she was dead before the fire, and we're going to follow it through.
Yeah, it was just a great interview, and Alan is very easy to talk to, and he's, like I said, the knowledge is priceless. I don't know. I thought it was a great interview.
I did too. We'll have to have him back.
Definitely have him back. I'd like to hear the feedback from Doug and stuff like that about what he thinks as well. Yeah, in the future, I'd really like to have Alan back on.
Yeah, as we get more into this, I would love to, hear what he has to say as we continue the investigation and working with Doug. And, the other thing we wanted to do real quick was I made a post in the Facebook group, but we also want to put it out here on the podcast that we made a mistake in, I think it was 2 episodes ago, when we were discussing the alternate theory of Judy's route. And we mentioned that Grandma Wilson had dementia. So we were wrong. That's not correct. That's not accurate. As everybody can imagine, we talked to a lot of people, a lot of family, a lot of community. And, we heard this information. We thought it was
credible,
cool. Thank you. And it wasn't. And that happens. It's 14 years. Everyone has a different perception. Now, could Grandma Wilson had some confusion, but still been alert and oriented? Sure. But she was never officially diagnosed with dementia, as the family knows. So we wanted to put that out there.
I agree. That caused a little bit of a stir, and I can understand why. But that's the evolution of an investigation. You're going to find out sometimes information that might not be 100% accurate, but that's why we do what we do and why we correct ourselves and why we give updates. We're more concentrated on information regarding Judy, people who saw her, people with information about her and stuff like that. So, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but that's how it is.
Yep. So that was a mistake. We corrected it. We've apologized, and, we'll just keep moving forward. And we're humble enough, to say, yeah, it's not right. But listeners should know that as we keep evolving, as Justin said, things are going to change, just like the electricity. We thought there was no electricity. Doug now confirms that there is. So things change. It's just part of the investigation. We're doing it live.
That's why this is a real-time investigation, because you're listening. This is not pre-recorded. We record these episodes 3 days before I release them, and we are constantly getting information and tips throughout the rest of the week. So this is legitimately a real-time investigation. So you guys are learning things as we're learning things, and we're learning things every day.
We are. We are. So we are both sick. If the listeners can hear it in our voice or in Justin, but we are troopers. We're dedicated. We did an interview with.
Yeah, last couple of days were rough. It took about everything I had to do that Zoom call with Doug yesterday. I was sitting here just like miserable, and as soon as it got over, I was like, I'm going back to bed, and that's exactly what I did. So
you're so funny. Yeah, we're both really sick. You can hear it in my voice, but also there's many times where we're talking to Alan and had to mute myself because I'm coughing or blowing my nose. And so, this just goes to show, and Justin's sick too. We got on and did an interview with Alexa from WTAP today, and we will do what is needed, to get justice for Judy. And it just shows our level of dedication to, making sure that we find out what happened and give answers. This means a lot to us. And we will do what needs to be done. And I just need, everyone to know that this is not, something we take lightly.
Everybody by now already knows the information for the tip line, for the tip email. And now we do have another number that goes directly to Doug as well. So yeah, join the Facebook group, share the podcast. The more people listening, the better. I actually gave an update in the group, I think it was last week, that this podcast and Judy's case is now being heard in all 50 states along with 10 other countries. So we're trying to get that word out, and we're getting a lot of tips, and that's always a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. So stay tuned, and we'll be back next week.
All right, talk to you later, Melissa.
Bye, feel better.
Yeah, you too.